Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Many people see the story of Harry Potter as a simple fairy tale that matures along with its characters. But if you reread the books as an adult, your perspective changes. Between the lines, hidden among spells and school adventures, lies something far more unsettling. Today, we'll talk about the darker truths that slipped past our childhood memories. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Hogwarts. One of the most dangerous schools. Every child once dreamed of receiving that letter sealed with the Hogwarts crest, but once you look at Hogwarts through adult eyes, the wonder turns into horror. The school is filled with deadly creatures, secret passages, traps, and even spells capable of killing. And their favorite pastime, Quidditch, can easily end in a fall from great height, or a blow to the head from an iron ball. Moaning Myrtle and Cedric Diggory are just the officially known victims of Hogwarts, but who knows how many tragedies were quietly erased from its history. Number 2. The Marauder's Map, a magical tool for surveillance. At first glance, it seems like an innocent map that simply shows where people are within the castle, but in truth, it's one of the most powerful surveillance tools imaginable. Anyone who possesses it can track every student's movements, know where they are, and even spy on their private lives. In the Prisoner of Azkaban movie, there's a curious detail. During the credits, the map shows 2 pairs of footprints, positioned rather closely together. Coincidence? Or did the filmmakers hint that Hogwarts hides far more secrets than we think? Number 3. Lies and deceit in the wizarding world. The magical world may appear noble and just, but that's only an illusion. Fake coins, polyjuice potion that allows one to change appearance, and magical items for tracking others, all these reveal a world built on deception. Even the Ministry of Magic, the supposed symbol of order, has been caught lying and covering up the truth more than once. The Wizarding Society lives under a constant shadow of deceit, where anyone can be something other than they appear. Number 4. Love potions. Magic's most disturbing weapon. Among the most unsettling elements in the Harry Potter universe are love potions. The Imperious Curse is unforgivable because it robs a person of free will. But love potions do the exact same thing, and yet they're sold openly in shops. Remember Merope Gaunt, Voldemort's mother? She used a potion to enslave the man she loved. From a moral standpoint, so that's not love, it's magical assault. And perhaps it's no coincidence that from this act of manipulation was born one of the darkest wizards of all time. Number 5. The Dursleys, victims of a Horcrux? Think back to how terribly the Dursleys treated young Harry. But what if their cruelty wasn't just a matter of character? Harry himself was a Horcrux, containing a fragment of Voldemort's soul, radiating darkness and corruption. Horcruxes poison everything around them, bringing out the worst in people. Perhaps years spent under the same roof with such a source of evil made the Dursleys bitter and hostile. Maybe they too were unwilling victims of dark magic. Number 6. Slytherin, is it truly evil? Since Hogwarts was founded, Slytherin has been branded as the House of Darkness. But is it really the students' fault that society labels them as villains from childhood? The other 3 houses always kept their distance, treating Slytherins with suspicion from the start. What happens to someone who's told all their life that they're bad? They either break or become exactly what others expect them to be. Maybe the legend of the Dark House is nothing more than the result of centuries of prejudice. Number 7, Dolores Umbridge and the Centaurs of the Untold Story. Umbridge is one of the most hated characters in Harry Potter. Her cruelty and arrogance turned Hogwarts into a nightmare for students. But her punishment in the Forbidden Forest is far from comforting. It's disturbing. The centaurs dragged her deep into the woods, and though the films left the scene vague, the books include ominous hints. In mythology, centaurs are proud and often aggressive creatures. Umbridge returned alive, but deeply traumatized. What happened in that forest, we can only guess. Number 8. The Ministry of Magic, bureaucracy over justice. The Ministry of Magic was never the guardian of justice. It was the guardian of control. When Harry stood before the Wizengamot for using a simple Patronus to save his life, he wasn't treated as a child in danger, but as a criminal. You are here to answer to the charges of using underage magic before Muggles, Fudge declared, his voice sharp with politics, not law. The room was full of power, not fairness. Even Dumbledore's calm defense couldn't hide the truth. The trial was never about justice. It was about obedience. The Ministry didn't want truth. It wanted silence. Throughout the series, the Ministry shifts from negligent to openly corrupt. Under Fudge, it spreads propaganda, denying Voldemort's return. Under Scrimgeour, it uses fear to control. And under Pious Thickness, it becomes the tool of evil itself. What begins as bureaucracy ends as tyranny. Posters, trials, surveillance, all in the name of safety. It's a chilling reflection of our own world, where order so easily becomes oppression. The Ministry's greatest spell was not a curse or hex. It was the illusion that it served the people. Number 9. Albus Dumbledore, wise mentor or master manipulator. Albus Dumbledore is the kind of man whose wisdom hides a terrifying truth. He always knew more than he admitted. As children, we saw him as the perfect mentor, the calm light in a storm of chaos. But rereading the story as adults, his choices feel heavier. He wasn't simply guiding Harry, he was preparing him to die. "You are the 7th Horcrux, Harry," he reveals only after his death through Snape's memories. Dumbledore knew all along that Harry would have to face Voldemort unarmed, ready to be killed. And yet, he kept smiling at the boy who trusted him completely. He was, above all, a strategist. Every death, every victory, every loss, all part of a plan only he understood. He placed Harry with the Dursleys, knowing it would protect him but also cause him pain. He sent children into danger, believing that lessons learned through suffering were worth the risk. "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are," he once said. But, in truth, Dumbledore's own choices often left others to carry the burden. Was it courage or cruelty to let a child walk toward his death because it served the greater good? Even his past casts a shadow on his brilliance. His friendship with Gellert Grindelwald, a man who dreamed of ruling over Muggles for their own good, shaped the way Dumbledore saw power. He learned to fear it, yet never stopped using it. When he orchestrated the final battle from beyond the grave, through carefully left instructions, it was clear he never stopped playing the game. Dumbledore loved Harry, yes, but perhaps he loved his grand design more. He was not a villain, not a saint, but something far more human, a man who believed the ends justified the means and who carried the weight of being right, even when it broke his soul. Number 10. Peter Pettigrew, the fear that lives in us all. Peter Pettigrew is one of those characters everyone loves to hate. The cowardly friend who betrayed James and Lily Potter, handing them over to Voldemort to save himself. He lived for years as a rat, literally, hiding in the pockets of the Weasley family, feeding on crumbs, avoiding the world he had destroyed. Children see him as disgusting. Adults see something far more frightening, a man consumed by fear. "He would have killed me, Sirius," Pettigrew screams when cornered, and in that moment his terror feels painfully real. Not everyone is born a hero. Pettigrew's betrayal wasn't born from evil, but from weakness. He wasn't like James or Sirius, brave and reckless. He wasn't clever like Remus. He was ordinary. Too ordinary for a war. When surrounded by power, he chose the side that looked unstoppable. And when Voldemort fell, he didn't seek redemption. He hid. His fear became his master, dictating every choice until he was nothing but a shadow of the man he once was. His end is the most tragic proof of who he truly was. When he hesitated to kill Harry, the boy who once showed him mercy, his own silver hand, the one Voldemort had given him, turned against him. "You owe your life to Harry Potter," the Dark Lord had said. That life ended the moment he tried to repay it. Pettigrew's death wasn't justice, it was irony. He lived afraid to die and died because he couldn't stop fearing. In him we see the part of ourselves we'd rather deny. The voice that whispers, "What if I'm not brave enough?" Number 11. House Elves, the slavery no one wants to discuss. When we first meet Dobby, it's easy to see him as comic relief, a clumsy, wide-eyed creature whose loyalty to Harry seems almost silly. But reading the story as an adult, his presence becomes something else entirely. Dobby is a slave. He serves the Malfoy family who abuse and humiliate him, and his magic, the very thing that makes him special, is used to keep him chained. When he says Dobby is free on Teague after Harry tricks Lucius Malfoy into giving him a sock, it's one of the most powerful moments in the series. Yet it's also heartbreaking, because one free elf doesn't change a world built on servitude. House elf slavery is one of the darkest secrets in the wizarding world. Generations of wizards accept it without question. They call it tradition. Even Hermione, when she tries to start SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, on deck, is mocked by her friends. Ron laughs. Harry stays silent. Their reaction shows a painful truth. Oppression often survives not through cruelty, but through indifference. The elves' loyalty is praised only because it benefits their masters. No one asks what they might want for themselves. Kreacher's story makes this even clearer. The old black family elf is bitter, hateful, and broken. He clings to the memory of his cruel mistress, Walburga Black, and despises those who show him kindness. But when Harry treats him with respect, Kreacher changes. His loyalty shifts. He fights for the same cause that once disgusted him. "Kreacher will fight for Master Harry," he shouts in the Deathly Hallows. That moment is not just redemption for Kreacher. It's proof that even the most broken servant still has a heart capable of choice. The tragedy is that most wizards never see it. The magical world prides itself on progress, schools, spells, innovation, but turns away from the chains beneath its own roof. The story of the House Elves reminds us that even in a world full of miracles, injustice can hide behind comfort and habit. Magic cannot make you good. Only compassion can do that. Number 12. Death as a companion to growing up. Death follows Harry Potter from the very beginning. It is there in the quiet tragedy of his parents' murder, in the shadow that shaped his childhood. As children, we read these scenes and feel only fear or sadness, but reading them as adults, we recognize something deeper. That death is not just an ending in this story, it is a teacher. Every loss Harry faces pushes him closer to understanding who he truly is. Sirius dies and Harry learns the pain of losing family. Dumbledore dies and Harry learns to stand alone. Each goodbye strips away his innocence but strengthens his soul. The death of Cedric Diggory marks the end of childhood for everyone in the story. His murder is sudden, meaningless and cruel. Kill the spare, Voldemort says, and a life ends in an instant. It's the first time Harry sees that evil doesn't always make sense. The world can be unfair, and sometimes good people die for nothing. Cedric's death turns the Triwizard Tournament from a game into a graveyard. For readers, it's the same turning point. The moment the magic stops being safe. Dumbledore's fall from the astronomy tower carries another kind of lesson. When he tells Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all those who live without love," it's not comfort, it's truth. The people we lose never truly leave us. What destroys us is the inability to keep loving after they're gone. Dumbledore teaches Harry and all of us that courage isn't in escaping death, but in continuing to live with compassion after it strikes. And when Snape, Fred, Remus, and Tonks fall in the Battle of Hogwarts, the message becomes clear. Victory has a price. Harry wins, but he stands among ghosts. Growing up means accepting that loss is part of life, not its opposite. The world of Harry Potter endures not because of spells or wands, but because it mirrors reality, a world where love and death walk side by side and where light is only meaningful when it shines through darkness. Number 13, Severus Snape, a hero or a man destroyed by love. Severus Snape's story is not one of glory, but of quiet torment. From the first book, he appears cruel and cold, sneering at Harry and humiliating his students. But behind that mask lives a man who never stopped grieving. His cruelty was a shield, his silence a prison. When Dumbledore once asked if, after all these years, Snape still loved Lily Potter, his answer, always, became one of the most haunting moments in the entire series. Snape's life was shaped by a single emotion: love. He loved Lily Evans with the desperate devotion of someone who had nothing else. But his choices destroyed everything between them. In his desire for recognition and belonging, he joined the Death Eaters, serving Voldemort, the very man who would murder her. When he realized what he had done, it was too late. From that moment, his life turned into penance. He begged Dumbledore to protect her son, even if that son carried the face of the man she had chosen instead of him. Snape became a double agent, walking a knife's edge between Voldemort and Dumbledore. He lived surrounded by lies, hated by those he saved, trusted by no one. Every decision was a wound. He watched Harry grow, despising him for his father's arrogance, yet saving his life again and again. "You have your mother's eyes," Dumbledore reminded him, words that pierced deeper than any curse. Harry's eyes were both punishment and mercy, the only piece of Lily left in a world that had forgotten her. In the end, Snape died as he lived, alone, misunderstood, and still loving the woman who never loved him back. His death was not heroic in the traditional sense. It was quiet, almost gentle. Harry held him as the light faded, and Snape whispered, "Look at me," needing one last time to see those eyes. He was a man destroyed not by hate, but by love, too powerful to let go. And that is what makes him one of the most human characters in the entire story. Numbers on a 14, Voldemort and the fear of death, a mirror of human nature. Voldemort was not born a monster. He was born as Tom Marvolo Riddle, a boy who grew up in an orphanage, alone, afraid, and unloved. When Dumbledore first met him, Tom was already terrified of one thing: weakness. "There is no good and evil, there is only power," he would later say, a belief that came from the same place as his fear. For him, death was the ultimate defeat, the final proof that he could be controlled by something greater than himself. But the more Tom tried to escape death, the less human he became. He split his soul into pieces, creating the Horcruxes, his insurance against mortality. Every murder tore away part of his humanity. Dumbledore told Harry he showed just as much contempt for the body as for the soul. Voldemort's path to immortality was, in truth, a slow suicide of everything that made him a man. His victories gave him power, but stripped him of compassion, love, and even the ability to feel joy. And yet, this horror feels strangely familiar. Voldemort is not just a villain. He is a reflection of every human who fears the end. His obsession with eternal life mirrors our own desperate attempts to cling to youth, to legacy, to control. Where we use medicine and technology, he used magic and murder. But the emotion is the same, the refusal to accept the natural cycle of life and death. In the end, he was destroyed by the very thing he denied, mortality. When Harry faced him in the Great Hall, Voldemort stood alone, surrounded by the bodies of those he had tried to outlive. His final moment was silent, almost pitiful. He died a man who feared death so much that he forgot how to live. That is the tragedy of Tom Riddle. He didn't lose to Harry Potter, he lost to his own fear. Number 15, The Unforgivable Curse and the Loss of Innocence. There is a strange kind of silence that follows a spell too powerful to be spoken aloud by children. In the world of Harry Potter, magic is often wrapped in wonder, floating feathers, shimmering patronuses, glowing wands in the dark corridors of Hogwarts. Yet beneath the charm and laughter lies something unsettling, a quiet awareness that every spell carries a shadow. When read as children, we see adventure. When read as adults, we see consequence. There is one particular thread that becomes darker the more we think about it, the moment when a boy's anger meets forbidden power. Long before Harry Potter ever heard of unforgivable curses, these words were whispered like urban legends. Avada Kedavra, Crucio, Imperio, 3 spells, so dangerous that even speaking them aloud felt like trespassing into a sacred, dreadful place. They belonged to adults, to murderers, to Death Eaters. But as time passed, Hogwarts, this sanctuary for learning, slowly turned into a battleground and its students into soldiers. What began as lessons in defense became rehearsals for survival. Harry's classmates were no longer memorizing charms to pass exams. They were preparing for war. And it was within this quiet transformation that Harry crossed a line that even his teachers had feared he would. We all remember the moment Bellatrix Lestrange killed Sirius Black. It was quick, merciless, and devastating. The spell that tore through the veil, Avada Kedavra, was not shouted in rage, but spoken with a kind of twisted pleasure. Bellatrix laughed as Sirius fell, and that laughter became a sound Harry could never erase. From that point on, the story ceased to be about a boy learning magic. It became about a boy learning vengeance. When Harry later faced Bellatrix, something changed in him. Rage, hot and uncontrolled, became his teacher. He shouted Crucio with all the pain of loss, and for the first time the line between right and wrong blurred. That moment is easy to miss when you are young. To a child, Harry's attempt at revenge might seem justified, a burst of anger against someone who had destroyed his world. But to an adult reader, the scene carries the heavy scent of guilt. It is the first time Harry tastes what it means to inflict pain intentionally. The spell doesn't work as Bellatrix expected. She laughs and mocks him for not truly meaning it. "Never used an unforgivable curse before, have you, boy?" she sneers. "You need to really mean them, Potter." Those words, cruel as they are, reveal something profound. The curse feeds on emotion, not technique. And in that moment, Harry realizes that cruelty, too, has to be learned. The tragedy of that scene lies not in the failure of the spell, but in its success as a moral turning point. The boy who once refused to harm others now stands in a place where love cannot shield him from hate. Now, this is not about a magical battle, it is about a psychological collapse. In Harry's shaking hand, the wand becomes more than wood and phoenix feather. It becomes a weapon, an extension of grief. That is what makes the Crucio scene so haunting. It shows us a teenager, barely 16, discovering that revenge feels powerful and wrong at the same time. When read through adult eyes, it is not a moment of triumph, but the one of corruption. We forget, perhaps too easily, that Hogwarts is not a normal school. Here, failure in class can mean death. A miscast spell can tear flesh, destroy a soul, or break the will. From the very beginning, children are taught spells that manipulate the world in ways too vast for their understanding. Wingardium Leviosa may lift a feather, but what stops it from lifting a person and dropping them from the sky? The curriculum flirts with danger, and under Dumbledore's gentle smile hides the knowledge that these children are being prepared for something far darker than exams. In that sense, Harry's Crucio is not an accident. It is the inevitable product of a world where violence has been normalized. There is a haunting detail in how J.K. Rowling describes Harry's emotions before he casts the curse. Harry's mind was blank with rage. He wanted her to suffer the way Sirius had suffered. That line is pure tragedy. The word blank captures the emotional void where empathy once lived. Rage, not reason, guides his hand. Adults reading the passage see what children might miss, the way trauma transforms grief into cruelty. Harry, who spent his life rejecting the darkness that killed his parents, now channels it through his own wand. It is a horrifying symmetry. The victim becomes the wielder. And yet, Harry's curse fails to fully harm Bellatrix. The spell hits, she flinches, but she is not destroyed. This, too, is symbolic. Harry's heart, despite its rage, is not completely given to darkness. He cannot truly mean the curse because he is still himself, a boy who feels pain more than hatred. Bellatrix's laughter, cruel and echoing, is her victory. She knows he is too human to be like her, but to Harry this failure is not comforting. It is humiliating. It is the first time he realizes that morality in war can be a weakness. The guilt of that understanding will linger through every book that follows. Number 16, The Ghosts of Hogwarts, Living Memories of Pain. The Ghosts of Hogwarts are some of the most intriguing, yet easily overlooked characters in the Harry Potter series. When first encountered as children, they seem like quirky, harmless figures, almost comical in their eccentricities. Nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, is polite but tragic in his endless attempts to earn his knighthood. The fat friar, with his jovial manner and plump figure, seems more like a gentle giant than a spectral figure. The Grey Lady, the elusive ghost of Ravenclaw, offers nothing but distant beauty and melancholy. But as readers grow older and revisit J.K. Rowling's world through more mature eyes, a darker, more painful layer to these seemingly light-hearted apparitions begins to reveal itself. These ghosts, who once appeared as harmless or even humorous, are reminders of the profound emotional scars that linger long after death. They are the tragic souls of Hogwarts, trapped in a spectral limbo, haunted by the pains and regrets of their mortal lives. The ghosts in Hogwarts are not just whimsical decorations within the magical world, they are deeply tied to the concept of memory and unhealed wounds. They exist not as mere observers, but as living reminders of past tragedies. Each one carries the shadow of death in a way that transcends their supernatural existence. And in this context, it is easy to see how Hogwarts, a place of learning and growth, also houses these broken fragments of its past. It is a school where not only knowledge is passed down, but also pain, regret, and unfinished business. They are reminders that life, even in its afterlife, does not let go of the things that were left unresolved. Take, for example, the ghost of the Grey Lady, Helena Ravenclaw. She is not merely the silent figure who wanders the corridors of the castle, but a woman whose life was marked by betrayal and violence. Helena was the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. But rather than basking in her mother's legacy, Helena's life took a dark turn. She stole her mother's diadem, the very symbol of her greatness, and fled. When Rowena sought to retrieve it, a confrontation between mother and daughter led to Helena's death. Her own father, a man whose name is long forgotten in the books, struck her down in a fit of rage after she had been cornered by her mother's pursuit. In that moment, Helena became a ghost of pain, bound to Hogwarts by the guilt and sorrow of the circumstances surrounding her death. Her spectre lingers as a silent testament to the dark emotions that tore apart her family, a haunting reminder of a moment when love turned to betrayal, and betrayal turned to death. Then there is the Bloody Baron, whose tragedy is one of the most heartbreaking of them all. He is the ghost of Slytherin House, a spectral figure draped in chains with bloodstains that mark his robes and his soul. The Baron's story is one of love, madness, and regret. He was in love with Helena Ravenclaw, and his passion drove him to violence. After Helena fled with the diadem, the Baron followed her, hoping to bring her back. But when he caught up with her, the love turned to rage, and in a moment of madness, he killed her. Horrified by what he had done, the Baron took his own life, forever marking himself with the stain of his actions. His ghost, forever bound to the castle, serves as a reminder that love can be both redemptive and destructive. It is a tragic irony that the Baron, a figure who embodies sorrow and penitence, is condemned to relive his mistake eternally. Nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor House, is another tragic figure whose afterlife is steeped in unfinished business. Nick was a knight who met a brutal and untimely death when an executioner, unable to sever his head properly, left him with a disfigured, half-severed neck. This cruel fate led to Nick's eternal struggle with his identity, as he was neither fully alive nor truly dead. His ghost is trapped in a form that mirrors his unresolved pain. A head that is only barely attached to his body, a permanent reminder of the life he lost and the incomplete manner in which he was taken from the world. Despite his light-hearted nature, Nick is burdened by the shame of his death. He remains at Hogwarts, yearning for the approval he never received in life and seeking a way to achieve true knighthood, an honor he was denied in his mortal existence. Number 17. The Children Who Grew Up After the War. The final battle at Hogwarts, the triumph of good over evil, presents a world where Harry Potter and his friends, now older, finally find peace. The war has ended, Voldemort defeated, and the wizarding world seems to be on the path to recovery. However, as an adult reader, one sees more than just the celebration of victory. In the aftermath, the children who were born into this war-torn world are left to deal with the deeper scars that can never be fully healed. They are the children of survivors, their lives shaped not just by the war's end, but by the trauma that lingered long after the dust had settled. When the battle at Hogwarts concluded, it felt like the curtain had been drawn on an era of conflict. Voldemort's reign of terror was over, and the world seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But beneath the surface, the reality was far different. The wounds of war run deep, and these wounds do not fade with time. Hermione Granger, for example, had endured the horrors of being tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange. During her imprisonment in Malfoy Manor, she was subjected to the Cruciatus Curse, a painful and terrifying experience that left her with lasting psychological scars. She never truly recovers from this ordeal, despite her outwardly strong and determined demeanor. Though she moves forward with a sense of purpose, fighting for the rights of house elves and working for the ministry, one wonders what it costs her to do so. Can someone who has been through such horror ever truly live without the shadow of fear? The way Hermione chooses to bury her trauma, using her work as a distraction, speaks volumes. She is, after all, only human. The war has taught her that resilience is necessary, but even the most resilient are not invulnerable. Then there's Ron Weasley, who witnessed the death of his brother Fred. Ron's grief is silent, and its depth is often overlooked. Fred's death marks a turning point in Ron's life. It forces him to mature rapidly, to step up as a leader in ways he was never prepared for. While he eventually finds happiness with Hermione, we cannot ignore the deep sadness that shadows his every interaction. How does one live after the death of a sibling, particularly one as close as Fred? How does Ron manage the guilt of not being able to save him? His sorrow is internalized, and though he moves forward, it is clear that Ron's life is never as carefree as it once was. His nightmares, his insecurities, and his moments of intense vulnerability are just a few of the many ways in which he is still haunted by his past. In many ways, the war takes more from him than it ever did from Harry, for Ron must live with the loss of his brother every single day. As for Harry, the boy who lived, his childhood was stolen from him. From the moment he learned of his true heritage, his life was marked by constant fear. Fear of Voldemort's return, fear for the safety of those he loved, and fear of his own fate. For Harry, the war never truly ends. Even when Voldemort dies, the memories of that constant tension remain, etched into his soul. As an adult, Harry is still plagued by the trauma of his childhood. He has a family of his own, and yet he carries the weight of the deeds. War on his shoulders. He never gets to be the carefree child that he was denied. The relationship he shares with Ginny, while loving, is also complex. They both bear scars from the past, scars that cannot be ignored. In the quiet moments, when Harry is alone with his thoughts, the enormity of what he went through as a child is impossible to ignore. He may have saved the world, but the cost is written in the lines of his face and the weight in his heart. He doesn't speak much about the trauma of his past, but it's clear that the darkness never really leaves him. His sense of guilt, his constant need to protect, and his tendency to push others away all point to a man who has never truly healed. The truth about the post-war wizarding world is that while the external battle may have been won, the internal battles rage on. There is no healing without confronting the past, and many of the characters, though outwardly successful, are still struggling with the scars of war. And then there's the question of the children born after the war. What kind of world are they inheriting? How do they grow up knowing that their parents were not only warriors but also victims of a generation-long war? There is no way to fully shield the next generation from the echoes of the past. Even if the world is no longer on the brink of destruction, the emotional toll of those who survived the war is carried into the lives of their children. Even the world around them feels different. The Ministry of Magic is no longer an oppressive institution, but it's also far from perfect. The battle for justice continues, with Hermione's tireless work at the Ministry a constant reminder that peace is fragile. and while the wizarding world may no longer face the threat of a Dark Lord, new challenges arise. The question of how to rebuild after such devastation hangs in the air, unspoken but ever present. The trauma that permeates the lives of those who lived through the war affects their approach to leadership, to family, and to their roles in society. Number 18. Souls trapped in portraits. In the magical world of Harry Potter, the portraits at Hogwarts are often seen as little more than quirky elements of charm, bringing the school to life with their moving images and animated conversations. As a child, the portraits seem like harmless sources of entertainment. The ones that line the walls of the Gryffindor common room or hang in the halls of Hogwarts seem almost alive, filled with personalities that are amusing or occasionally infuriating. They chatter, argue, and offer assistance to students in need, often providing the sort of light-hearted moments that only a child can fully appreciate. But as an adult, when rereading the series, one begins to notice the darker undertones of these enchanted pictures. These portraits, after all, are more than just images. They are magical copies of people who once lived, people whose very souls seem trapped within the painted frames. And that raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of magic and the afterlife in the wizarding world. The first time this unsettling aspect of the portraits becomes evident is when Harry and his friends interact with the various painted characters, such as Sir Cadogan, who briefly takes over as the guardian of the Gryffindor common room, or the famous painting of the Fat Lady. As a child, it's easy to dismiss their actions as merely magical, like the moving staircases and enchanted objects that are scattered throughout Hogwarts. But with age comes a shift in perspective, and one begins to wonder, where does the soul of these characters come from? Are they simply magic, brought to life, or do they contain a part of the person who once inhabited the original form? This is where the questions grow murky and the implications become far more unsettling. The notion that these portraits might actually house the souls of the deceased adds an eerie dimension to the magical world. The very idea that a wizard or witch could choose to have a part of their soul preserved after death, locked within a frame, is both intriguing and horrifying. The portrait of Professor Dumbledore, for example, hangs in his office, greeting students with his calm and wise demeanour. But is the Dumbledore who speaks to Harry in this painting truly Dumbledore, or is it merely a reflection of the man's personality, an echo of the person he once was? The more one thinks about it, the more uncomfortable the idea becomes. These portraits are not just magical representations, they are a form of life after death, a persistent existence, a continuation of a person's essence beyond their physical form. It is as if the wizarding world has developed a way of circumventing death, a way of keeping a piece of themselves alive even after their bodies have decayed. There are moments in the series that suggest that the portraits are not simply enchanted but contain something far deeper. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, for example, when Harry speaks to the portrait of Professor Dumbledore, he receives advice that seems deeply personal and connected to the man himself, even though Dumbledore is long dead. This is not just a magical copy, it is as if a piece of Dumbledore's spirit lives on in that portrait, watching over Hogwarts and its students. The idea that wizards could create such a thing opens up disturbing possibilities. If part of a person's soul is trapped in a painting, then is their essence truly gone? What happens when they are forced to live forever in this way, frozen in time in a state that is neither truly alive nor truly dead? In the case of Dumbledore's portrait, it seems to have its own consciousness, reacting to events and offering guidance. But does it feel? Does it suffer? It's easy to see this as a pleasant notion, a way to keep the spirit of a beloved figure alive. But when you look deeper, the ethics of it become far more complex. When one considers the act of creating a portrait with a piece of one's soul, it draws an uncomfortable parallel with the act of splitting one's soul, which is the dark magic Voldemort uses to preserve his own life. Voldemort's Horcruxes, like the Diary of Tom Riddle or the Ring of Marvellogaunt, represent an extreme form of immortality achieved through the violent splitting of the soul. In contrast, the portraits seem to offer a subtler, more elegant form of life after death. But this raises the question, is there really a difference? If a wizard can choose to preserve a piece of their soul in a portrait, are they not in essence choosing a form of immortality? And if they are, what price do they pay for this continued existence? The very idea of splitting one's soul to achieve a form of immortality calls to mind the darkest forms of magic that most wizards would recoil from. In the wizarding world, the act of creating a Horcrux is considered one of the most horrific crimes one can commit. It is an unnatural act, one that violates the very essence of life. But in the case of portraits, the act is framed as a benign and even respectable form of magic. Yet both methods involve a form of immortality that comes at the cost of the soul. In both cases, a part of the person's essence is taken from them and preserved in some other form, be it a portrait or a magical object. The difference lies in the method and the extent of the magic involved. Voldemort's actions are an abuse of power, an attempt to cheat death by tearing his soul apart. The portraits, on the other hand, are created with intent, a kind of magical preservation of one's personality after death. But the question remains, is this not the same desire to survive after death, a desire that could have dark consequences? The existence of these portraits also highlights the uneasy relationship between the magical and the mundane. In the non-magical world, death is a finality that cannot be avoided. People mourn the loss of loved ones and seek to honor their memories in various ways. In the wizarding world, however, death seems to be something that can be managed, something that can be postponed, if only for a time. Portraits allow wizards to cheat the finality of death in a way that is more acceptable than the grotesque act of creating a Horcrux, but it still raises profound questions about the nature of life and death. Are wizards so afraid of death that they must find a way to preserve themselves even after they are gone? And if they can preserve themselves in this way, does it diminish the meaning of death altogether? One particularly telling moment in the series comes when Harry reflects on the painting of the Fat Lady, who guards the entrance to the Gryffindor common room. She is not just a simple portrait. She is a living, breathing entity, capable of reacting to the world around her. But what happens when the person who inhabited that portrait dies? Does their essence live on, confined to the painted frame? The Fat Lady herself is not a character we spend much time with, but the question of whether she is a real person or merely a reflection is a haunting one. The portrait of Sir Cadogan, a somewhat comical character who briefly takes over as the guardian of the Gryffindor common room, is another example of how these portraits can seem like mere distractions for students, but upon reflection they also carry a deeper, darker meaning. If these are truly people, their existence is a strange one, suspended in time, forever watching but never truly interacting with the world outside their frames. These portraits raise another unsettling possibility, that death in the magical world is not the end, but rather a transition to something else. For wizards, death is not necessarily a finality, but a way to live on in a different form. In a way, these portraits represent a kind of magical afterlife, where the soul is preserved and continues to exist in a new, more controlled form. While this may seem like a comforting idea to some, it raises a chilling question about what happens to the soul when it is trapped in this way. Is it still the person who once lived, or is it merely a shadow of who they were? And if it is a shadow, then what does that say about the value of life itself? Does immortality, even in such a magical form, come at too high a cost? Ultimately, the portraits in Harry Potter serve as a reminder that the magical world, while filled with wonder, is also deeply entwined with the complexities of life and death. These magical creations, seemingly harmless and full of charm, also offer a glimpse into a world where the boundaries between life and death are more fluid than we might have imagined. And as we grow older, we begin to see the true implications of this magic. In the end, the portraits may not be so different from the Horcruxes after all. They are both ways of keeping a piece of oneself alive after death. Just one is far more elegant, and the other far darker. But both share the same fundamental desire, to live on no matter the cost. Number 19. The Madness of Azkaban, a prison that breaks minds. In the world of Harry Potter, Azkaban stands out as a symbol of fear and darkness. To a child, it is simply a place where the worst of the worst are locked away, a fortress holding dark wizards like Sirius Black or Bellatrix Lestrange. Yet, as an adult, the true horrors of Azkaban unfold, revealing something far more sinister than just a prison. Azkaban isn't just a place where prisoners are punished. It's a realm that feeds on the very soul of its inhabitants. It's a place that turns humans into shadows of themselves, where the line between justice and cruelty blurs. Azkaban's true nature is evident when Harry first learns about it in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. As a child, Harry's understanding of the world is limited, and so he, like the Ministry of Magic, sees Azkaban as a place where dangerous wizards are thrown to rot. However, the more Harry learns about it, the more it becomes clear that Azkaban is no ordinary prison. It is a place of torment, a place where madness is not just a possibility, but an inevitability. The Dementors, the monstrous guards of Azkaban, are not simply magical creatures that serve as prison wardens. They are creatures that drain the very essence of what makes a person human. These Dementors feed on despair, sucking out all joy and hope, leaving nothing behind but an empty shell of a person. Prisoners subjected to their presence are slowly driven mad, losing their sense of identity and their will to live. The Dementors do not just guard the prison, they are the very means by which Azkaban ensures its prisoners never leave the same. In a place where hope is a distant memory, where every thought is consumed by the cold emptiness of despair, the concept of justice begins to seem increasingly irrelevant. In the end, it is not about punishment, it is about total annihilation of the human spirit. When we are introduced to Sirius Black, the notorious prisoner who allegedly betrayed Harry's parents to Voldemort, Harry's world is turned upside down. Sirius's escape from Azkaban, a place believed to be impossible to break out of, shocks everyone. Yet, as the story unfolds, we begin to realize that the conditions inside Azkaban are far worse than we could have ever imagined. The Ministry of Magic, in its quest to punish wrongdoers, has created a system of cruelty that leaves its victims broken and irreparable. Sirius, once a man of pride and courage, is reduced to a hollow shell when Harry meets him. His years in Azkaban have aged him prematurely, and the madness that creeps in from the Dementor's presence is evident in the wildness of his eyes and the way he struggles to regain his sense of self. The real horror of Azkaban, however, lies in the system that created it. The Ministry of Magic, an institution meant to protect the magical community, has allowed this madness to persist for generations. They have chosen to use the Dementors as enforcers of law, knowing full well the damage they cause. and yet they justify it as necessary for the protection of society. But what does it mean when a government uses monsters to punish those who break the law? Is it truly justice, or is it simply another form of evil? The ministry may hold its head high, but its use of the Dementors is a dark reflection of the very crimes they seek to punish. Consider the case of Barty Crouch Jr., another infamous prisoner of Azkaban. He was a follower of Voldemort, involved in the cruelest acts of dark magic. However, when he is finally released into the custody of his father under dubious circumstances, we see that he too has been broken by the horrors of Azkaban. The man who once believed in the ideals of Voldemort is now a mere shadow of himself, driven to madness by the effects of the Dementors. What was once a man full of dark ambition is now a puppet, no longer capable of clear thought or rational action. He is another victim of a broken system that uses horror as a means of control. For the prisoners, it becomes clear that Azkaban is not about reform or redemption. It is a place that erases the very humanity of those within it. It's a prison designed not just to contain but to erase identity itself. Those who enter Azkaban are not simply locked away, they are destroyed from the inside out, turned into something less than human. The madness that consumes them is not just a side effect of their imprisonment, it is the prison itself. The Dementors don't just guard the prisoners, they break their minds, leaving them hollow and incapable of ever returning to the world they once knew. Azkaban, as seen through the lens of adult understanding, represents something far more dangerous than a mere prison. It becomes a mirror for the cruelty that can arise in any society, especially one that justifies its actions as being in the name of justice. The use of Dementors as guards reflects the ease with which a society can descend into moral ambiguity, using evil to fight evil. The Ministry's decision to employ such dark creatures reveals how easily institutions can lose their way, losing sight of what justice truly means. Moreover, Azkaban is a place that highlights the deep flaws in the magical world's approach to crime and punishment. While other forms of punishment might aim to reform or rehabilitate the offender, Azkaban offers no such hope. It does not seek to correct behavior. It seeks to destroy the person entirely. The punishment is not just for the crime, but for the very existence of the criminal. It is a place that denies any possibility of redemption. This is something that resonates more deeply as one matures, as one comes to understand the complexity of justice, morality, and punishment. The story of Harry Potter, when looked at through this more adult lens, becomes a story not just about magic and adventure, but about the dangers of unchecked authority and the consequences of using fear as a tool of control. The Ministry of Magic's reliance on the Dementors reflects a deep moral failing, a failure to understand that justice is not about revenge or retribution, but about fairness, compassion, and the potential for change. By relying on creatures that feed on despair, the Ministry has created a system that perpetuates suffering and madness, ensuring that the cycle of violence and cruelty continues. In many ways, Azkaban represents a warning about the dangers of dehumanization. When individuals are treated as nothing more than their crimes, when they are locked away in a place designed to strip them of their identity and humanity, the lines between right and wrong become dangerously blurred. The Ministry, in its quest to maintain order and punish evil, becomes just as evil as the criminals it seeks to punish. Azkaban is not a place of justice. It is a place of destruction, a place where the soul is shattered and the mind is broken. It is a place where no one leaves the same. And yet, This madness is not isolated to the walls of Azkaban. It spreads, infecting those who work there and those who oversee the punishment. The very system that claims to bring justice becomes complicit in the very darkness it seeks to eradicate. This is the true horror of Azkaban, not just the prison itself, but the fact that it is a reflection of a society that has lost its way. In its attempt to fight evil, the Ministry becomes part of it, using cruelty and fear as tools to control and punish. In the end, Azkaban is not just a prison. It is a symbol of how easily power can corrupt, and how even the most well-intentioned institutions can descend into madness when they embrace darkness as a means of control. Number 20, Betrayal and Silence, the hidden cost of war. During the Second Wizarding War, a pivotal moment that many only recognize fully in adulthood is the price of war paid through silence and betrayal. In the Harry Potter universe, the battle between good and evil is not just fought with wands and curses, but with the choices that each individual must make. Choices that are often made in the shadows, where fear, survival, and self-preservation come into play. These choices, though often overlooked in youth, become crucial when one understands the gravity of what they mean. Betrayal, silence, and the cost of survival are themes that stretch beyond the epic battles at Hogwarts, lingering in the lives of those who survived. Neville Longbottom's journey is one that seems clear-cut when viewed through the lens of a child's eyes. His rise from a clumsy, uncertain boy into the hero who stands against Voldemort at the end is nothing short of inspirational. However, when one digs deeper, it becomes clear that Neville is not the sole example of courage. There are countless others who, driven by fear or a desire to protect their loved ones, chose silence or even betrayal. They are the individuals whose stories we are not told, whose actions, though consequential, remain buried beneath the weight of their choices. The question arises, what happens to those who simply chose to survive, who aligned themselves with neither side, but stood in the shadows? Fear is a powerful motivator, and in times of war, it often compels people to make decisions that, in retrospect, they might regret. In the Wizarding world, this can be seen in the character of Regulus Black, who initially joined the Death Eaters with the firm belief in Voldemort's mission. But over time, as he witnessed the horrors of Voldemort's cruelty, Regulus's conscience began to unravel. His eventual decision to try to retrieve one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, at the cost of his life, marks a turning point. Yet, Regulus's earlier actions, his initial support for the Dark Lord, were far from heroic. They were the actions of a man too fearful to defy his upbringing and his environment until it was almost too late. Regulus's story is one of redemption, but there are many others who do not have the same chance. They are the people who made the silent choice to remain neutral, to not pick a side. These individuals did not fight for the cause of the Order, nor did they support Voldemort's mission. They simply went along with their lives, trying to avoid attention, desperately hoping that they would be left out of the war. In doing so, they became complicit in the suffering around them. Their silence became a weapon in itself. They chose not to act, to not intervene, thinking that by remaining passive, they could avoid the consequences of conflict. But as time went on, the weight of their silence grew. It became apparent that there was no escape from the repercussions of inaction. Those who had stayed neutral were faced with the realization that silence in the face of evil is not a neutral act at all. It is a form of complicity. The war had left behind scars not only on the battlefield, but in the hearts of those who chose to stand idly by. This is something that characters like Hermione Granger and Harry Potter come to understand as they age and reflect on the past. Harry, in particular, comes to recognize that his own survival was due in no small part to the sacrifices of others. He did not fight alone. Behind him stood people like Neville, Ginny, and even the stoic Professor McGonagall. But Harry also understands the importance of those who were not on the front lines. His thoughts turn to people like Peter Pettigrew, whose betrayal of Harry's parents led to their deaths. Pettigrew's fear and desire to survive clouded his judgment, and he chose to align himself with Voldemort. This choice, this act of betrayal, is something Harry cannot easily forgive. However, it is not only Pettigrew who must live with the consequences of his actions. There are others like him who made choices for the sake of their own survival, but at what cost? One cannot ignore the role that fear plays in shaping decisions during times of war. Fear of death, fear of loss, fear of losing loved ones. All of these emotions are powerful forces that guide characters' actions. For some, the fear of death led them to make the ultimate betrayal. Peter Pettigrew's treachery is a prime example. His decision to side with Voldemort, betraying his best friends in the process, was born out of fear of death, fear of Voldemort's power. He was unwilling to face the consequences of his own choices, and so he took the path of betrayal. In doing so, he sealed the fates of Harry's parents, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever change the course of Harry's life. Yet it is important to remember that the story of betrayal and silence is not just confined to the ranks of the Death Eaters. The members of the Order of the Phoenix, too, faced moments of silence. It is easy to look at people like Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and James Potter, and see them as heroic figures who fought bravely. But these men, too, carried their own burdens. They had made their own choices in the war, and some of those choices were not as straightforward as they might appear. Sirius, for example, had been a friend to James Potter and a godfather to Harry, but his own role in the war was complicated. He had been in prison for years, wrongfully accused of betraying his friends. While he fought for the Order, there were also things about his past, secrets, that weighed heavily on him. Even in the light of his heroism, he carried a burden that no one fully understood. What then, of those who made the choice to stand aside, to not join either side? There is a silent group in the wizarding world, those who were too afraid to pick a side, too scared of the repercussions to speak up or take a stand. This was the price they paid. Their silence became their contribution to the war. The question arises when you are caught between fear and morality. What is the true cost of survival? Is it worth it to remain silent, to allow others to fight in your stead, to make your peace with the fact that you chose not to act? The answer, for many, is no. The aftermath of the war is a world full of those who have survived, but who are unable to shake the guilt of their own choices. They live with the knowledge that they stood by, did nothing, and now must face the consequences of their inaction. The silence they once thought would protect them only serves to haunt them. It is the quiet burden they carry, the weight of a choice that cannot be undone. In the end, the heroes of the Second Wizarding War are not just those who fought on the front lines. They are also the ones who, like Neville Longbottom, chose to stand up when it mattered most. They are the ones who refused to let fear dictate their actions, who understood that the cost of silence is far too great. For those who lived through the war, the true victory was not in the defeat of Voldemort, but in the recognition of the cost of their survival. It is a lesson learned only through the painful realization that silence, too, is a choice, and that choice carries a price. Number 21, Horace Slughorn and the Moral Decay of Wizarding Society. Gilderoy Lockhart's charismatic smile might have once been the embodiment of the magical world's lightness, but in the deeper, darker corners of Hogwarts, Another character's charm casts a more insidious shadow. Horace Slughorn, the beloved potions master, offers a far more complex and unsettling portrait of a wizard whose allure stems not from his obvious fame, but from the quiet manipulation of talent and the currency of power. On the surface, he seems to embody the mentorship of Hogwarts. Warm, enthusiastic, eager to see his students succeed. However, once you start to look beyond the surface, his moral descent becomes unmistakably clear, and that descent speaks volumes about the broader moral decay of the wizarding world itself. Slughorn is an aging wizard who holds court with his Slug Club, a group of students who are handpicked for their talent, heritage, or potential connections to power. He is a master of networking, someone who thrives on forging relationships with students whose talents or family backgrounds could provide him with future advantages. He appears to be genuinely fond of his students, taking a personal interest in their lives, but the more you observe his behavior, the clearer it becomes that his affection is not unconditionally generous. His love for students is transactional. He admires talent not for its inherent value, but for its potential to benefit him. This is where the darkness lurks beneath his otherwise amiable persona. Take, for instance, his relationship with Harry Potter. To Slughorn, Harry's magic is less about the boy's bravery or heart, but more about his connection to fame. The great Harry Potter, the boy who lived, carries an immense amount of cultural capital, and Slughorn sees the opportunity to position himself as an intimate of Harry's world. This desire for prestige isn't unique to Slughorn, it's a pervasive attitude within the wizarding world where status is currency and one's magical abilities are less about individual worth than about how they can be used to climb the social ladder. This transactional nature of Slughorn's affection, however, is not confined to the students he selects for his club. It is indicative of the larger society that he inhabits, a society that has grown cynical, where even magic cannot purify the human heart. It is here that the darker aspects of Slughorn's character start to come into focus, showing us that his moral compass has been deeply corrupted. Slughorn's choice to associate with Voldemort's Death Eaters during the First War, his failure to act against them, and his eventual reluctance to acknowledge the darker side of his relationships all speak to a profound moral decay. This decay is not simply about choosing the wrong side during the war. It's about a worldview that equates success with moral righteousness and is willing to overlook the cruelty of those who hold power. The notion of using others as stepping stones is something that runs through the entire narrative of Slughorn's life. The way he values success over kindness, power over integrity, is reflected in his past decisions. When Slughorn was young and studying at Hogwarts, he had a close connection with Tom Riddle, later known as Lord Voldemort. It is through Riddle that we see Slughorn's greatest moral failure, and it is this incident that highlights the fundamental flaw in his character. Riddle, of course, was no ordinary student, and his exceptional magical ability made him a particularly prized member of Slughorn's circle. But when it became clear that Riddle was not merely ambitious but deeply dangerous, Slughorn's instinct was not to challenge or confront him, but to turn a blind eye. His fear of losing the prestige and connections he had carefully cultivated clouded his judgment. Slughorn's failure to act in this moment is not just a personal moral lapse. It represents the pervasive rot within the wizarding world. The society that Slughorn inhabits is one that values power, prestige, and talent above all else, a world in which the weak are discarded and the powerful are protected. In this world, Voldemort is not a monster but a means to an end, a person whose dark ambitions, while deeply troubling, are nonetheless useful to someone like Slughorn. The world Slughorn inhabits doesn't care for morality or justice. It cares for what one can get from others. And this transactional mindset corrupts the very fabric of the wizarding society. Slughorn's attitude toward love also reveals the moral decay of the wizarding world. Love, for Slughorn, is not a pure or selfless emotion, but another currency to be traded. In his eyes, the relationships he forms are not built on genuine affection, but on the potential advantages they can bring. He surrounds himself with people who can elevate his status, and in doing so he reinforces the idea that love and friendship are nothing more than tools for personal gain. In this way, Slughorn represents a more subtle, insidious form of corruption within the magical world. It's not the overt evil of Voldemort or the Death Eaters, but the quiet acceptance of moral compromise for the sake of self-interest. This commodification of love and human connection extends beyond Slughorn to the broader culture of wizarding society. The world Slughorn inhabits is one in which social climbing, wealth, and power are the ultimate goals, and relationships are measured by what they can provide. This mirrors the flaws of the Muggle world in many ways, but in the wizarding world, magic only amplifies the consequences. With the ability to manipulate the world around them through spells and potions, wizards like Slughorn have the power to shape their destinies, but it is precisely this power that leads them down dangerous paths. Magic doesn't make people better, it simply makes it easier for people like Slughorn to indulge their worst impulses. One of the clearest examples of this moral decline is seen in the way Slughorn interacts with his students. His actions are often subtle, but they reflect a worldview where talent and usefulness are valued above all else. He fosters a sense of entitlement in his Slug Club members, encouraging them to believe that their worth is tied to their abilities and potential. This creates a toxic atmosphere where the value of an individual is determined solely by what they can contribute to the greater good, or, more accurately, to Slughorn's personal ambitions. Slughorn's own failure to understand or confront the moral consequences of his actions is illustrated further in his reaction to Harry's decision to keep the memory of his conversation with him a secret. Slughorn, after all, had no problem using people when it suited him, but when Harry refused to give him a token of his own loyalty, it became clear that Slughorn's actions were not motivated by a desire for personal connection, but by his desire for control. He had no qualms about manipulating others to gain what he wanted, and it was only when Harry refused to play along that he began to experience the consequences of his own moral shortcomings. In essence, Slughorn's story is a reflection of the broader moral collapse within the wizarding world. He is a character who represents the dark side of ambition, the kind of ambition that seeks to elevate oneself at the expense of others, the kind of ambition that places personal gain above the well-being of others. His actions serve as a reminder that power, when wielded without moral consideration, can corrupt even the most well-meaning individuals. And in the end, Slughorn's failure to recognize the true cost of his actions shows us the dangers of a society that values success above all else, a society that has forgotten the true meaning of love, loyalty, and friendship. Number 22, artifacts that feed on human pain. In the magical world of Harry Potter, many of the most significant artifacts are not just inanimate objects, but possess a dark, sinister quality. These magical items are not merely enchanted tools or devices, they are alive in a way fueled by the emotions and vulnerabilities of the human soul. The Diary of Tom Riddle, the Horcruxes, and even the Mirror of Erised are just a few examples of magical objects that tap into the darkest parts of human nature. They thrive on human emotions, feeding off the very weaknesses that make us human: longing, fear, and desperation. This hidden aspect of magic is often overlooked in the earlier readings of the series, but when revisited at a more mature age, these artifacts take on a far more chilling meaning. Take, for instance, the diary of Tom Riddle, a seemingly harmless object at first glance. It is, however, a twisted object that preys on the deepest human desires. The diary acts as a vessel for Tom Riddle's young soul, a part of Voldemort's fragmented consciousness. It thrives on the loneliness and desperation of Ginny Weasley, a young girl yearning for recognition and companionship. She is drawn to the diary because it seems to understand her pain, offering her a false sense of comfort and connection. Through it, she becomes vulnerable, feeding the diary with her emotional energy. The diary did not answer her question directly, but she found it easy to share her thoughts and feelings with it, J.K. Rowling writes. Ginny's desire for validation and attention becomes the very thing that the diary needs to grow stronger, and it is this human longing that allows the dark magic of the diary to manipulate her. In the case of the Horcruxes, the objects created by Voldemort to store pieces of his soul, we see another example of magical artifacts that thrive on human fear. The Horcruxes are a reflection of the darkest part of human nature, the fear of death. Voldemort, in his attempt to escape mortality, creates these cursed objects to preserve his essence indefinitely. Each Horcrux is imbued with a part of Voldemort's soul, and in return it gains power from the death and suffering of others. The act of creating a Horcrux requires the ultimate sacrifice, a murder, the taking of a life to split the soul. This twisted connection between death and magic serves as a dark commentary on the lengths to which people will go to avoid confronting their own mortality. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione set out to destroy each Horcrux, they are not merely breaking magical artifacts, they are confronting the very fears that bind Voldemort to this world, his obsession with immortality and his desire to subjugate death. The Mirror of Erist is another example of an artifact that feeds on human emotions, though in a different, more subtle way. The mirror shows the deepest desires of a person's heart, but it does not grant them. Instead, it leaves the viewer in a state of perpetual longing and despair, feeding off the emotions that arise from unfulfilled desire. The more a person looks into the mirror, the more they are consumed by their wishes, unable to move on from them. Albus Dumbledore warns Harry about the dangers of the mirror. It does not show you your future or your present, but your deepest desires. The mirror's power lies not in its ability to grant wishes, but in its ability to hold a person in the grip of their own fantasies. It is a dark reflection of how the human heart can be consumed by its own desires, unable to break free from the pain of wanting something it cannot have. These magical objects, all of which thrive on human emotion, serve as powerful symbols of the darkness that exists within people. The magic in the wizarding world does not simply draw its power from spells or incantations, it draws from the very heart of human vulnerability. The magic in these artifacts is not external, it is the magic of human frailty, fear, and longing that makes them so powerful. It is as if these objects represent a deeper truth, that darkness in the magical world is not created by external forces, but rather by the very human flaws and weaknesses that are inherent in every person. The Diary of Tom Riddle is not just a magical object, it is a manifestation of Ginny Weasley's internal struggles. She is a young girl who feels overlooked and insignificant, and in the diary she finds an outlet for her emotional turmoil. Her vulnerability is what allows the diary to thrive, and it is this same vulnerability that ultimately leads to the near death of Harry and his friends. In a sense, Ginny's desire for recognition and acceptance becomes her downfall. The diary preys on her need for validation, twisting her emotions into something dark and dangerous. The more she writes in the diary, the more it becomes a part of her, until it consumes her entirely. This illustrates how human emotions, when left unchecked, can lead to destructive consequences. The Horcruxes, too, are a reflection of Voldemort's fear and desire for control. Each Horcrux represents a part of Voldemort's soul, and each one is created through an act of extreme violence, a murder. The act of creating a Horcrux is a literal tearing of the soul, a physical manifestation of the deep fear of death that drives Voldemort. He is so consumed by this fear that he is willing to sacrifice his humanity in order to escape it. The Horcruxes themselves are not just magical objects, they are the embodiment of Voldemort's internal battle with death. The more Horcruxes he creates, the more fragmented his soul becomes, until he is no longer fully human. The Horcruxes, in this sense, are not just symbols of power, but of the internal rot and decay that comes from living in constant fear. The Mirror of Erised operates in a similar way, albeit in a more insidious fashion. Unlike the Horcruxes, which are rooted in fear and violence, the mirror preys on the more subtle human emotions of desire and longing. It shows people what they want most in the world, but it does not give it to them. Instead, it leaves them trapped in a cycle of unfulfilled desires, consuming their hearts and minds. Harry, in his grief over the loss of his parents, becomes entranced by the mirror, unable to tear himself away from the image of his family. He is warned by Dumbledore that the mirror can be dangerous, for it shows not what the person needs, but what they want. This reflects the danger of becoming lost in one's own desires, of allowing them to consume one's life. It is a reminder that the pursuit of unfulfilled dreams can lead to a kind of emotional death, where a person is unable to move forward. These artifacts, when examined closely, reveal a profound truth about the nature of magic in the wizarding world. Magic does not simply arise from external forces or spells, it arises from the very hearts of the people who wield it. The darkness that magic can create is not simply the result of dark curses or evil wizards. It is the result of human weaknesses, of fear, of desire, of loneliness, and of the inability to let go of what cannot be. The artifacts in the Harry Potter universe serve as metaphors for the ways in which people can become consumed by their own emotions, trapped by their own desires, and ultimately destroyed by the very things that make them human. In the end, the most powerful magic is not the magic of spells or wands, but the magic of the human heart. The diary, the Horcruxes, and the Mirror of Erised all serve as reminders that the greatest dangers in the wizarding world are not always external, but internal. They are the products of human emotions, twisted and manipulated by magic. The darkness in the world of Harry Potter is not born from spells or curses. It is born from the vulnerabilities that exist within every person. And it is these vulnerabilities, these weaknesses, that magic, in its darkest form, feeds upon. Number 23, used children. The fate of Harry, Neville, and others. In the Harry Potter series, there are moments that, when first read, seem like the typical heroic milestones, the triumphs that make a protagonist's journey one of glory and victory. However, upon revisiting these moments as an adult, you start to realize a much darker, deeper reality about the lives of these beloved characters. The children, Harry, Neville, Hermione, Ron, and others, who were thrust into the heart of a magical war, weren't just pawns in a grand story. They were tools used by adults who seemed to see them not as people, but as symbols, weapons, and means to an end. One of the most striking examples of this dark truth is the role Harry plays as the Chosen One. As a child, he is told he must defeat Voldemort, that his very existence is tied to the downfall of the Dark Lord. It seems to him that he is the hero of his own story, but as he matures, he begins to see the weight of the truth behind his destiny. Dumbledore, whom Harry trusts as a mentor, carefully guides him toward the inevitable confrontation with Voldemort, but it becomes clear that Harry's fate was never his own. Dumbledore admits in a heartbreaking moment that he had always seen Harry as a weapon in the fight against evil. This realization comes too late for Harry, as he grapples with the idea that his life and the lives of his friends were manipulated long before they had any understanding of the world they were thrust into. It is not just Harry who suffers this fate. Neville Longbottom, whose bravery and eventual triumph are celebrated in the Battle of Hogwarts, is also a victim of being used. Neville's childhood is marked by fear, self-doubt, and the heavy weight of being the other chosen one. His parents, Alice and Frank Longbottom, were tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange. Despite this, Neville is constantly seen as a secondary figure in the grand scheme of the war, overshadowed by Harry's prominence. But Neville's bravery ultimately plays a crucial role in the defeat of Voldemort, especially when he destroys the last Horcrux, Nagini. However, just like Harry, Neville's courage was not self-driven. He was part of a larger plan, a piece in the puzzle that others were orchestrating from the shadows. Dumbledore never openly acknowledged Neville's value until it was too late to undo the damage. The very idea of used children extends far beyond Harry and Neville. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, is another character who is undeniably manipulated by the adults around her. At first glance, Hermione seems to be the perfect ally, the one who pushes Harry and Ron toward success with her knowledge and logic. But as an adult reading these books, you begin to see how much of Hermione's actions are dictated by the adults she looks up to. From the moment she meets Harry, she is thrust into his mission, and though she has agency in many ways, her decisions are often motivated by a desire to help Harry succeed. It's clear that the adults in her life, notably Dumbledore and the Ministry, guide her choices, pushing her toward dangerous paths that, while ultimately noble, cost her a great deal of emotional pain. Her parents, whom she loves dearly, remain unaware of the danger their daughter is in, a metaphor for how these children were constantly walking in the shadows of the adults' decisions, even as they risked their lives for the greater good. Ron Weasley, too, experiences the same sense of being pushed into the heart of things by forces much larger than himself. While Ron's bravery cannot be denied, he is often swept up in the tides of Harry's destiny. As the youngest son of a large family, Ron already carries the weight of wanting to prove himself, and this need for validation makes him a natural ally for Harry. But Ron's role in the trio often feels like that of a supporting character in someone else's story. He is frequently overshadowed by Harry's importance and Hermione's intellect. Even in his moments of personal growth, such as standing up to his fears during the final battle, Ron's actions seem to be more about proving his worth than acting out of self-discovery. The adults around him, particularly his brothers and his parents, guide him toward what they believe he should be, without ever fully understanding the emotional toll it takes on him. The most disconcerting aspect of this used children narrative is the role that the larger institutions of the magical world play in shaping these children's fates. The Order of the Phoenix, a group established to fight against Voldemort, is initially portrayed as a band of heroes working together to protect the world. But as you read between the lines, you begin to understand that the adults in the Order, particularly Dumbledore, are willing to sacrifice the younger generation for the sake of victory. When Harry is thrust into danger during the battle at the Ministry of Magic, it becomes clear that The adults, including members of the Order, are willing to risk the children's lives for the greater good. Harry is not just a victim of Voldemort's wrath. He is also a pawn in the larger, often morally ambiguous war fought by the adults around him. The Ministry of Magic, too, plays a pivotal role in shaping the destinies of these children. The Ministry's obsession with control and its resistance to accepting the reality of Voldemort's return force the young heroes to take matters into their own hands. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the formation of Dumbledore's army is a direct response to the Ministry's refusal to acknowledge the truth about the Dark Lord's return. It's a rebellion that sets the stage for the young wizards to act as the leaders of a movement that should have been led by the adults. This forced independence, while empowering the children, also highlights the dangerous situation they were in, fighting a war that they didn't fully understand against enemies who were all too willing to manipulate them for their own agendas. Even the seemingly benign characters like Hagrid and Mad-Eye Moody are complicit in this adult manipulation. Hagrid, whose loyalty to Dumbledore and the values of the Order is unquestionable, encourages Harry and his friends to risk their lives for the cause, even when they are just children. Mad-Eye, a veteran of the First Wizarding War, often uses his experiences to push the children toward dangerous paths, training them to defend themselves in ways that no child should have to learn. These mentors, though well-meaning, fail to protect the children from the harsh realities of the war they are caught in. In many ways, they are as complicit in the manipulation as Dumbledore himself. The ultimate tragedy of this used children's story is that while these kids go on to become heroes, defeating Voldemort and bringing about peace, the toll it takes on them is profound. Harry, Neville, Hermione and Ron emerge victorious. But at what cost? They lose their childhoods, they carry scars that never fully heal, and they are left with the bitter realization that they were not just innocent bystanders in the war, but active participants in a larger, adult-driven game. In the end, these children become the adults they once looked up to, forced to confront the very same difficult choices that Dumbledore and others made. Their victory is bittersweet because they understand that in the end, they were always pieces on a chessboard, moved and used by the hands of those who claimed to protect them. By the time they reach adulthood, Harry and his friends have finally gained the perspective they needed to see the truth about their lives. They understand that in their formative years, they were exploited by the very people who should have protected them. But even as they face the consequences of this betrayal, they learn to reconcile with their past. They realize that while they were used, they also became the heroes they were meant to be, not because of the adults who directed their paths, but because they learned to make their own choices. This perhaps is the true victory, the one that no one could take from them. Number 24, Gringotts, the greed that governs the magical world. In the magical world of Harry Potter, the Gringotts Wizarding Bank stands as one of the most iconic symbols of wealth and power. As a child reading the series, Gringotts seems like a mysterious and awe-inspiring place. The towering marble walls, the gnome-guarded vaults, and the sense of danger that pervades its halls create an impression of a magical institution that is both grand and secure. But as readers mature and delve deeper into the nuances of J.K. Rowling's world, Gringotts emerges as a striking representation of greed, inequality, and the dark forces that drive the wizarding economy. What initially seems like a place of enchantment and wonder reveals itself to be a microcosm of the unjust societal structures that govern the magical world. The goblins who manage Gringotts are initially presented as mystical, almost otherworldly creatures with their sharp features, long fingers, and their capacity for magic. They are not human, yet they serve an essential role in the magical community, guarding vaults filled with treasures and precious items that belong to witches and wizards of all classes. However, upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that these goblins are not treated as equals. The wizarding world exploits them, seeing them as tools to facilitate their own wealth and power, while simultaneously dismissing their rights and status. The stark inequality between the goblins and the wizards is one of the more troubling aspects of the Gringotts narrative, and it becomes especially apparent when one considers the goblins' role as the workers and protectors of a system designed to enrich wizards. At the heart of this issue lies the idea that goblins, despite their ancient and formidable magical abilities, are treated as second-class citizens in the world of wizards. The very foundation of Gringotts Bank reflects this harsh reality. The goblins' magic, ancient and much older than that of humans, is not recognized as equal to the magic of witches and wizards. Their work at Gringotts, where they guard treasure and precious artifacts, is done in a way that ensures their labor goes unnoticed. The wizards rely on goblins to protect their most valuable possessions, yet they refuse to grant them the same status or rights. This division between human and goblin is particularly striking when one considers that goblins are the ones who hold the real power within the bank. It is their ancient magic that keeps the vaults secure, yet they are bound by laws that prevent them from accessing the wealth they guard. The goblins' resentment towards wizards, especially their treatment as inferior beings, is hinted at throughout the series. Their deep-seated hatred for the magical community is most clearly expressed in the conflict over ownership of the magical treasures they guard. The most notable example of this comes in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione break into a Gringotts vault. The vault is protected not just by powerful enchantments, but also by goblins who are keenly aware of the wealth and power contained. Within the bank, it is this dynamic, goblins working tirelessly to protect wizarding treasure while being denied recognition and rights, that speaks to the darker undercurrent of Gringotts. The deeper implications of this inequality are not fully apparent to Harry or to younger readers, but as we grow older, we begin to see that Gringotts is not just a bank. It is a reflection of the systemic issues of greed, power, and exploitation that exist in both the magical and non-magical worlds. The irony of a world where magic exists yet is structured by the same principles of greed and discrimination that govern the Muggle world is painfully clear when considering Gringotts. In a society where one can cast spells to manipulate the very fabric of reality, it is ironic that the magical world's wealth is controlled by the same forces that perpetuate inequality. It is not just the goblins who are subject to the whims of the wealthy and powerful in the wizarding world. The entire economy of the magical world is based on a system of exchange that benefits the elite. The wizarding upper class, epitomized by families like the Malfoys, relies on the fruits of the labor of others, whether those others are goblins, house elves, or marginalized witches and wizards. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry visits Gringotts for the first time, he is awed by the magical security and the enormous wealth housed within the bank. However, as an adult reader, it becomes clear that this wealth, like much of the wizarding world's power, is built on exploitation. The vaults, stacked with galleons and treasures, represent not just prosperity, but a hidden injustice. In a world where the rules of magic should ideally promote fairness and justice, the reality of Gringotts is far from utopian. Instead, it is a harsh reminder that even in a world of wonder, the structures of inequality persist. The relationship between wizards and goblins echoes the relationship between the wealthy elite and the working class in the Muggle world. Gringotts serves as a microcosm of the capitalist system that values profit over human dignity. The goblins, though they possess the power to change the system, are bound by their own traditions and laws that prevent them from challenging the wizarding status quo. They are trapped in a system that values their labor but not their worth. This dynamic is particularly evident when considering the goblins' historical relationship with treasure. Goblins, unlike wizards, view wealth differently. They believe that treasure belongs to the one who has forged it or found it, not simply to the one who possesses it. This philosophy of ownership clashes directly with the wizarding world's view of wealth as something to be hoarded and passed down through generations. In this way, Gringotts is not just a place where money is stored, it is a battleground for differing views on ownership and power. The greed that runs through the veins of Gringotts is not just about the accumulation of wealth, it is about control. The wizarding world's wealth is not just about having money, it is about using that money to control those who serve. This is most evident when considering the way the Malfoy family interacts with Gringotts. Lucius Malfoy, a wealthy and influential wizard, treats the goblins with a sense of superiority and entitlement, using his wealth to exert control over the magical economy. The Malfoys, like many other wizarding families, embody the principles of privilege and entitlement that are so deeply embedded in the magical world's social structure. The theme of wealth and power, so deeply embedded in the world of Gringotts, reflects the darker aspects of the wizarding world. The deeper Harry and his friends venture into the mysteries of Gringotts, the more they uncover about the extent of this corruption. It is not just about vaults filled with riches, it is about the people who hold the keys to those vaults and the lengths they will go to in order to protect their power. The goblins, in their desire to reclaim what they believe is rightfully theirs, are no longer mere servants. They are the silent opposition to a system that has kept them in servitude for centuries. In the end, Gringotts is not just a magical institution. It is a symbol of the greed, inequality, and exploitation that runs rampant in both the magical and muggle worlds. The fact that this system exists in a world full of magic makes it all the more striking. The magical world, capable of achieving such wonder and awe, is still governed by the same laws of greed and power that shape the muggle world. Gringotts stands as a reminder that no society, no matter how fantastical, is immune to the corrupting influence of wealth and power. It is a place where magic is both a tool and a weapon, and where the lines between good and evil, right and wrong, are often blurred by the pursuit of wealth. Number 25. Professor Trelawney, a tragic joke about faith and vision. Professor Sybil Trelawney is one of the most memorable yet often misunderstood characters in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. To young readers, she may seem like a comical and eccentric figure, an exaggerated caricature of a mystical fortune-teller with her wild gestures and overdramatic predictions. However, as one matures and revisits the series, it becomes clear that there is much more to Professor Trelawney than meets the eye. Her character, far from being a simple source of comic relief, is a poignant exploration of isolation, the struggle for validation, and the painful burden of intuition in a world that refuses to believe in it. Behind her eccentricities lies a deep and painful truth, one that can only be fully appreciated by those who are willing to look beyond the surface. The first time readers encounter Professor Trelawney, she appears to be an oddity at best, a joke at worst. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are introduced to her in a classroom where her dramatic entrance and dubious predictions about the future make her an object of ridicule. She appears to be a figure caught between the mystical and the absurd, with her oversized glasses and penchant for theatrical, outlandish statements. The first impression she leaves is one of complete absurdity, especially when she predicts Harry's death, an event that seems as out of place as her demeanour. To a child, this is simply another absurd part of the whimsical world of Hogwarts. Yet as the years pass, the true significance of Trelawney's character slowly emerges. As Harry and his friends grow older, they begin to notice how other characters, particularly the more grounded professors, treat Trelawney with disdain and condescension. Professor McGonagall, who is often a voice of reason and discipline, dismisses her as a joke, constantly undermining her role in the school. The students, too, are not kind, with some ridiculing her, and others rolling their eyes at her predictions. Even the magical community, where belief in the supernatural is commonplace, seems to have no place for her brand of divination. She is the subject of mockery, not just among the students, but also among the very people who should be her peers. As the reader grows older, this treatment of Trelawney starts to resonate on a much deeper level. For she is not simply a laughingstock, she is a tragic figure, trapped in a world that refuses to acknowledge her talents, and by extension, her very humanity. Her prediction that Harry would die, for example, is not just an outlandish statement made for dramatic effect. It is, in fact, one of the most crucial moments in the series, yet it is immediately dismissed by the people who should understand its importance, and while her failure to predict Harry's survival after the second task in the Goblet of Fire is presented as an amusing moment, it is also a painful reminder of how often she is ignored, even when she is right. Perhaps the most striking example of this painful irony comes in The Order of the Phoenix, when Trelawney makes her most significant and accurate prediction yet, the return of Lord Voldemort. Though this event has been hinted at throughout the series, it is Professor Trelawney who is the first to foretell it. And ironically, she is once again disbelieved. The prophecy, delivered in a drunken stupor during an emotional breakdown, is treated with mockery, even though it is later revealed to be the key to Voldemort's return. In a world where magic is real, where supernatural occurrences happen on a daily basis, Trelawney's own magical abilities are dismissed as fantasy and delusion. This recurring theme of being dismissed, of seeing the truth but being unable to convince others, is what truly makes Trelawney's character so tragic. She is a person who knows, who feels, who sees things that others cannot, but her vision is not welcomed by those around her. It is not enough for her to be right. She must be believed. And therein lies the tragedy of her character. Trelawney's greatest gift, in her intuition and her ability to see beyond the veil, is constantly undermined and belittled by the very society that should be in awe of it. Trelawney's treatment at Hogwarts also reflects a broader theme in the Harry Potter series, the question of belief. It is not just Trelawney's ability to predict the future that is disregarded, it is also her very personhood, her emotions, and her desires. She is a woman who has lived her life in solitude, surrounded by people who mock her for her gifts, and yet she continues to press on, as if driven by a force that is beyond her control. Her predictions may not always be accurate, but they are often grounded in a deeper truth, a truth that others refuse to acknowledge because it challenges their understanding of the world. This theme of being dismissed, of being unseen, is especially relevant in the context of Trelawney's role as a woman in a male-dominated world. Throughout history, women with extraordinary abilities or insights have often been dismissed as hysterical or delusional. Trelawney's character can be seen as a subtle commentary on this societal tendency to silence women, especially those who do not fit into the conventional mold. Her eccentricities, which are often played for laughs, become a symbol of how society treats women who do not conform to traditional expectations. Her eccentricity is not a source of humor, but a reflection of her isolation and her struggle for validation. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we see another layer of Trelawney's tragic story when she is confronted with the loss of her position at Hogwarts. Despite her attempts to prove her worth, she is seen as expendable, a relic of a bygone era whose gifts are of no consequence in the face of greater threats. The destruction of her classroom, the symbolic space where she practiced her craft, is a poignant moment in the narrative, highlighting just how little value is placed on her knowledge. Once again, her gifts are dismissed, not because they are wrong, but because they do not fit the expectations of those around her. The irony of Trelawney's situation is most evident when we compare her with other characters who are also marginalized for their abilities, but are ultimately vindicated. Characters like Luna Lovegood, who, like Trelawney, sees the world differently from others, are treated with suspicion and ridicule by their peers. Yet Luna's eccentricities are eventually embraced, her insight valued, and her abilities recognized. Trelawney, on the other hand, never receives the same level of recognition or respect. Her position is one of perpetual struggle as she is constantly fighting to be seen and heard, even when the truth of her words is right in front of everyone. Trelawney's tragic arc culminates in the Deathly Hallows, when her role in the fight against Voldemort is finally acknowledged, albeit in a quiet and understated way. Though she is never given the credit she deserves, she is shown to be a crucial part of the resistance, a reminder that even those who are overlooked and underestimated can play pivotal roles in the greater story. It is a bittersweet moment that underscores the theme of invisibility and the struggle for recognition that runs throughout Trelawney's character. Ultimately, Professor Trelawney is a tragic figure whose story is one of unrecognized brilliance. She represents the painful reality of being an outsider in a world that does not understand or appreciate your gifts. Her eccentricity, once seen as a source of humor, is revealed to be a coping mechanism for the loneliness and isolation she faces as a person who sees more than others can comprehend. The fact that she is able to predict two of the most important events in the series, the birth of the Chosen One and the return of Voldemort, and still be dismissed, speaks to a profound irony that runs through the Harry Potter series. The tendency of society to dismiss those who see beyond the surface, who challenge the status quo, and who speak the truth even when no one is willing to listen. In this way, Trelawney's character becomes a symbol of all those who are misunderstood and overlooked, a reminder that the greatest truths are often the hardest to accept. Number 26. Muggle-borns, blood purity and the illusion of equality. In J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, one of the most troubling aspects of the wizarding world is not the existence of magic itself, but the deeply ingrained prejudices that persist within it. At first glance, the term Muggle-born seems a harmless, if somewhat cruel, insult aimed at those born to non-magical parents. But as readers grow older, a more sinister meaning emerges. The concept of mudbloods, as they are derogatorily called, represents much more than mere name-calling. It is a manifestation of systemic discrimination deeply rooted in the wizarding community's view of blood purity. In fact, mudblood is the epitome of a social and racial divide in a world that, on the surface, may appear to be progressive and inclusive, but is, in reality, rife with prejudice. This harsh judgment based on one's origin highlights the paradox of a magical society that cannot rid itself of the most basic and vile form of discrimination, a belief that some are inherently superior to others. For a child reading Harry Potter, the insult mudblood may seem like just another bit of playground nastiness. After all, every young reader has encountered teasing and bullying over one reason or another. In the world of wizards, it seems like just another form of exclusion. However, as an adult reader, the true weight of the term becomes clear. It is not just an insult, it is a clear manifestation of the way society has constructed its divisions. It is a label meant to demarcate the pure magical bloodlines from the supposedly inferior ones, and it mirrors real-world divisions based on race, ethnicity, and class. The concept of blood purity is a central theme in the series. It is a concept that even characters like Hermione Granger, despite her brilliant talents, cannot escape. Her background as a Muggle-born means that from the very start, she is seen as lesser by many in the magical community, including the aristocratic Malfoy family. Draco Malfoy's disdain for her, while initially more focused on her social status, quickly becomes more pointed when he refers to her as a mudblood. This is not simply a snide remark, it is an attempt to define Hermione's worth based on an inherent characteristic that she cannot control. This distinction between pure wizarding families and Muggle-borns is so pervasive that even some of the most revered and respected magical families perpetuate it, as evidenced by the Weasley family's uneasy relationship with their blood status, despite their open and accepting attitude toward Muggle-borns like Hermione. The idea that some magical families are better than others because of their bloodline is a direct challenge to the notion of meritocracy. It suggests that no matter how powerful, intelligent, or capable a person is, they will always be judged by their origins. The prejudice is not based on an individual's abilities or character, but on something as arbitrary as who their parents were. This form of discrimination is particularly grotesque in a society that has the power to cast spells, shape the world around them with a flick of a wand, and cure ailments with potion. The irony, of course, is that those who possess the greatest power in the world, those capable of achieving extraordinary feats, are still bound by the smallest, most trivial prejudices. It serves as a powerful reminder that magic cannot erase the darkness in people's hearts. The Malfoys, as exemplified by Draco and his parents, are prime examples of this deeply ingrained blood purity obsession. Lucius Malfoy, a prominent supporter of Voldemort, is one of the leading figures in the push to preserve wizarding bloodlines. He not only values blood purity, but uses it as a means of establishing and maintaining power. His contempt for Muggle-borns and his association with the Dark Lord stem from the belief that pure-blood wizards should rule over all others, reinforcing a social hierarchy that keeps the lesser magical folk in their place. The Malfoy family's obsession with blood purity goes beyond simple classism. It is an ideology that perpetuates fear and violence, one that seeks to undermine anyone who does not fit the correct bloodline. Voldemort, himself born as Tom Riddle to a Muggle father, is a tragic example of the consequences of this blood purity obsession. His hatred of Muggle-borns, despite his own heritage, reveals the deeply twisted psychology that arises from feeling inferior. Voldemort's rejection of his Muggle father and his desire to purify wizarding bloodlines stem from his own internalized hatred of his roots. This paradox, where the most powerful and feared dark wizard of all time seeks to erase the very part of himself he despises, speaks volumes about how deeply ingrained hatred can shape one's actions. In the end, Voldemort's own disregard for his origins becomes his downfall, his refusal to accept that power is not determined by blood, but by one's heart and choices. The greatest tragedy in the wizarding world is not that blood prejudice exists, but that it is so pervasive that it clouds the judgment of even the most talented and well-meaning characters. For example, Severus Snape, a man who is initially depicted as a cruel and bitter figure, embodies this prejudice in his treatment of others, particularly Hermione Granger. Despite his position as a skilled wizard and a member of the Order of the Phoenix, Snape's deep-seated disdain for Muggleborns cannot be overlooked. Even after he proves his loyalty to Dumbledore, his prejudice toward Muggleborns is still evident. The complexity of Snape's character highlights the enduring battle between personal growth and societal programming. Despite his immense magical talent and ultimately noble sacrifice, Snape remains an individual who, in some ways, fails to transcend the biases instilled in him from an early age. Hermione Granger's journey offers the reader a different perspective. While she struggles with the societal biases against her, her sheer determination and brilliance allow her to rise above them. However, she is acutely aware of her status as a Muggle-born, and the constant reminders of her inferiority serve as a painful backdrop to her growth. Her relationship with Ron and Harry, especially in the early books, is a testament to the fact that while she may be discriminated against by certain members of the wizarding community, she also finds acceptance and love from her closest friends. Yet even within their friendship, there is a subtle, unspoken recognition that she will never fully belong to the elite circles of magical society. In contrast to the blatant cruelty of characters like Draco Malfoy or Lord Voldemort, the Weasleys represent the hope that a society based on blood status can evolve. While they are considered blood traitors by some of the more conservative members of the wizarding world, the Weasley family values love, loyalty, and kindness over bloodlines. However, even they are not immune to the pressures of society. Ginny, for instance, faces ridicule from some of her peers simply because of her family's status as poor blood. But despite these obstacles, the Weasleys continue to fight for a world where blood purity no longer dictates one's worth. The concept of mudbloods as a social and racial division provides readers with an important message. It forces them to confront the uncomfortable truth that prejudice can thrive in any society, no matter how advanced or powerful that society may seem. The magical world, for all its wonders, remains bound by the same flaws that affect the Muggle world: inequality, racism, and a deep-seated fear of the other. The series does not merely paint a picture of a society with magical powers, it holds a mirror up to our own world and forces us to reckon with the ways in which we divide ourselves. Perhaps the most profound message of Harry Potter is that magic cannot cleanse the human heart of prejudice. No matter how powerful a wizard may become, the biases they harbor will always limit their potential. In the end, it is not magic that defines a person's worth. It is their character, their actions, and their ability to see beyond the divisions that society imposes. As Dumbledore wisely points out, it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. This is the true power of choice, the ability to challenge the prejudices that have been passed down and to fight for a more inclusive world. Number 27, Dementors and Depression, the darkest metaphor of all. In the world of Harry Potter, the Dementors stand as one of the most chilling embodiments of fear. For children, they are no more than horrific shadows that suck the happiness out of everything they touch. But for adults, particularly those who have wrestled with the weight of life's darker moments, the Dementors become something more profound. They are not just monsters, they are a powerful metaphor for depression, a creature that doesn't kill the body but consumes the soul, stealing the capacity to feel joy. The impact of the Dementors on Harry Potter is a reflection of a deeper psychological reality, a painful reminder of the trauma we carry within us. As a child, Harry never truly understood what the Dementors represented, aside from their ability to make him feel cold and empty inside. When the Dementors first appear on the Hogwarts Express, Harry is gripped by an overwhelming sense of despair, a sensation that feels like a hollow pit in his chest. It is a physical response, an immediate and unmistakable loss of hope. At this point in his life, Harry does not yet have the vocabulary to explain what he feels, but he knows something in him is broken. The Dementors represent the unbearable weight of his past, the shadows of his traumatic childhood. They pull him back into the darkness he experienced when his parents were killed, leaving him with nothing but the cold emptiness of grief. The effects of the Dementors are not just magical, they are deeply psychological. Harry is marked by trauma from an early age, the sudden loss of his parents leaving him emotionally fragile. He is an easy target for the Dementors because they feed on the darkness that already exists within him. The spell of the Dementors, the sucking of happiness, the sensation of overwhelming grief, is something many adults can relate to. Depression is not always about the loss of physical life. It's about the loss of the will to live, the fading of joy, and the feeling that life itself has no color. Just as the Dementors do not kill the body but slowly drain the spirit, depression erodes a person from within. Harry's experience with them isn't just an encounter with monsters, it is an encounter with his own inner pain, which he has never fully confronted. What makes the Dementors so terrifying isn't just their physical presence, but what they do to the mind. They pull Harry into his worst memories, replaying the night of his parents' murder in vivid detail. The torment they inflict upon him goes beyond fear. It is the very essence of his emotional trauma made manifest. Harry has lived with the haunting memory of his parents' death for years, but the Dementors drag him back into that night, forcing him to relive the helplessness and loneliness that defined his early years. For an adult who has suffered from depression, the experience is all too familiar. Depression often feels like being trapped in a cycle of negative thoughts and emotions, replaying painful moments and feeling unable to escape them. The darkness the Dementors bring is not a distant threat, but an internal struggle, something that is always lurking, waiting to overwhelm. However, the true power of the Dementors lies not in their ability to create despair, but in how they reflect the process of dealing with that despair. When Harry finally learns the Patronus charm, he begins to understand that defeating the Dementors isn't about vanquishing the monsters with magic, but about finding something inside himself that resists the darkness. Expecto Patronum becomes more than just a spell. It is a declaration of internal strength. The Patronus, a force of light and hope, represents a positive memory, something Harry can cling to in the face of overwhelming sorrow. It is his belief in the good in the world, his connection to the love he once had, that allows him to summon the Patronus. In this moment, Harry learns that the key to fighting the shadows in his mind isn't through external force, but through an inner light, through the power of memory and love. For Harry, the memory that enables his Patronus is the thought of his parents' love. It's the knowledge that they cared for him, that their love transcended even their deaths. In the darkest moments, Harry reaches into himself and finds that love still burns within him, a flame that the Dementors cannot extinguish. This realization that love is a force that can overcome even the darkest of forces becomes Harry's greatest weapon. It's not magic in the traditional sense, but a deeper kind of magic, one that requires emotional vulnerability and acceptance of pain in order to be effective. The Dementors do not just represent a physical threat, they represent a mental and emotional one, and the Patronus charm teaches Harry that confronting his pain, remembering the love he has lost, and choosing to hold on to hope are the ways to combat the darkness within. The struggle against the Dementors also reflects a central theme in the series. The idea that the past cannot be undone, but it can be accepted. For Harry, his past is filled with trauma, but it is also filled with love. His parents' sacrifice, the love they gave him before they died, is what allows him to rise above the shadows of his grief. The Dementors, as terrifying as they are not the final word on Harry's emotional state. They may pull him into despair, but they cannot break him forever. In much the same way, depression may darken one's thoughts and feelings, but it is possible to find a way through it. It's not about denying the darkness, it's about holding on to the light, however faint it may seem. When Harry finally confronts the Dementors with his Patronus, he demonstrates that inner strength is what can overcome even the most terrifying forms of darkness. This lesson is not just about magic, it's about resilience, self-empowerment, and the importance of nurturing inner light. The fact that Harry is able to cast the Patronus charm successfully, despite all of the emotional baggage he carries, is a testament to his ability to rise above the forces that seek to crush him. The Dementors represent an overwhelming force of despair, but Harry's victory is symbolic of the strength it takes to fight depression in real life. He may not be able to erase the pain of his past, but he can choose to fight against it, to remember the light that still exists inside him. Harry's struggle with the Dementors can also be viewed as a parallel to the way many people cope with depression. Depression is not something that can be easily dispelled with a single solution. It's a complex, multifaceted condition that requires long-term effort and support. Similarly, Harry's victory over the Dementors isn't immediate or easy. It takes time and practice. He doesn't immediately know how to cast the Patronus. It takes multiple attempts and a deeper understanding of his emotions before he is able to succeed. In this way, the Patronus charm is a metaphor for the ongoing process of healing from trauma and mental illness. It's not a quick fix, but a long, deliberate effort to reclaim joy and light. In the end, the Dementors serve as a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always a way forward. Harry Potter's battle with the Dementors is more than just a magical confrontation. It is a poignant exploration of the emotional battles many face in real life. It is about the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of love and memory, and the power of hope. Just as Harry learns to find his strength in the light of his parents' love, so too can those who struggle with depression find their own light, sometimes hidden deep within themselves, but always present, waiting to be called upon. Ultimately, the Dementors are not just villains in Harry Potter, they are reflections of the darkness many of us face within our own minds. They are a reminder of the pain we carry, but also of the strength we possess to overcome it. By confronting the darkness within and holding on to the light, we can all find our own Patronus, a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of despair.